Friday, July 20th. Markets are calm in one sense. Mortgage rates and long-term interest rates really haven't moved for almost 6 months. But the noise out of the political world is clearly having an effect on markets. And there isn't a metric to measure exactly what's causing what, but we can see it in screens that risk is coming out of markets, that you can see people just pulling chips off of tables because they don't know what's going to happen next. This week, for all of the foreign policy stuff, the Helsinki stuff and so on, charts of markets were just as polite as they could be. And then Thursday morning, Mr. Trump decided to pick on the Fed. And you can see sharp movements in markets ever since. He did it again today. More threats of more tariffs in China, currency, I mean, just stuff. And it is hard to sort through it all. The reason that people like me, people in markets, react so strongly to presidential criticism of Fed policy, it doesn't have anything to do with what the Fed's going to do. The chairman, the governors, the regional Fed presidents are under so much pressure all the time that intervention by the president, if anything, just makes them dig in their heels, makes them more independent than they would have been otherwise. So what's the harm in some more noise? This is a semi-funny story. The whole idea of a central bank, like the Fed, the Bank of England, the European Central Bank, the Bank of Japan, and so on, is only 150 years old. The first one was in England, basically 1875. And yet, very few people know what they actually do, or should do. And the central banking is in largest part a confidence game, in which everybody has to believe in them and just leave them alone and let them do what they need to do. The Fed was created by Congress, not by the Constitution or by the White House. Its seat of power is in Congress. Congress knows that it can't be trusted with money. Congress doesn't let go of power for really any reason unless beaten to do it, but events in 1907 in financial markets were so ugly that Congress created the Fed in 1913, and we've left it alone ever since. Here we are 10 years after the great credit bubble, and we still don't have, probably never will have, a consensus about what happened, about who did it. Yeah, the Fed missed it in early years, but before the Dodd-Frank legislation, the Fed didn't have the authority to regulate credit. The criticism of the Fed, I mean, there are a lot of people who, I mean, every tin hat and wing nut in the country is ready to let loose at something. And the Fed is in for constant suspicion because people are suspicious of money. They're suspicious of bankers, and they ought to be. They're suspicious of elites, whether they're academic or rich folk. And if you gin up enough anger at an institution like the Fed, we wind up misleading ourselves. This will most likely work its way out, but for the moment, markets are on edge. Quiet would be a handy thing. In the copy near this video, I suggested the hypothetical of, if everything in the world was just exactly the way that it is today, but silent Calvin Coolidge was president, would we feel different if it was just quiet? To conclude on an up note, I got some data this week from the mortgage industry, from the largest consultant to mortgage servicers, which says that of all of the 50 states, Colorado today has the lowest loan delinquency rate of any state in the union, and also the lowest foreclosure rate. So if you're frustrated in competition with a bunch of other potential buyers in a house auction, know that all the rest of them are just as real as they can be. We don't have weak borrowers, we don't have weak applicants. The buying public is still strong, and it shows in no delinquencies, no foreclosures. Have a good weekend.